I hope that you will humor me in that I keep doing this where I'm taking some of your clips and doing my own commentary over it. But this particular episode is causing a lot of PTSD with me. And so I'd like to talk through my feelings on what is happening here. As somebody who started documenting the Me Too movement when it first broke in October of 2017 against Harvey Weinstein, and the fear that I saw running rampant in men, um, the gaslighting, the fear, because so many people were all of a sudden, all these revelations were coming out. People were women and other victims of other gender identities were suddenly finding their voices. And there was a huge wave of accusations that took out a lot of people, took out their careers. And some of y'all out there defended some of these folks and saved them. Saved them. So I have some thoughts on this. Let's go.
Following a short suspension, CNN has now officially fired their host, Chris Cuomo. So before I get to any more on this, including why I was not at all surprised by this firing, here is CNN themselves announcing it.
This is CNN breaking news.
And we have breaking news to report to you right now about CNN anchor Chris Cuomo. Earlier this week, Cuomo was suspended from CNN after documents revealed he had been involved more than previously known in shaping his brother, former Governor Andrew Cuomo's defense. Chris Cuomo, we should point out, has now been terminated here at CNN.
Don't get too excited just yet. It's not just because of his corrupt involvement of trying to protect his brother. Let's see what David has to say.
We have Jim Acosta making the official announcement on CNN. So, Cuomo, fired, gone. Now I'll get to his statement that he released. I'll also get to CNN's official statement here. But before I get to any of that, first, just to let you know, in case you want more details on what led to the suspension, that led to the firing, I already have a video on the suspension that goes over details around what Chris Cuomo was doing and how he was helping his brother during that, all those allegations that came out. But before I get to more on this, I just want to say that this is not surprising at all. Apparently, some people are surprised that CNN actually went ahead and fired him, considering Cuomo had the best ratings in prime time on CNN. But this is why they fired him. This was way too big of a PR mess for them to try and maintain any semblance of journalistic standards while keeping him at the network. Now, some people point...
Now, that's a very important point to remember. Because when power is threatened, they have a couple of choices of what they're going to do. They either fight that threat or they roll with it and move on. And it is unlikely that somebody like Chris Cuomo would not be able to survive something like this, given his connections and his power. Because corruption is usually just whatever, we move on. It's not that big of a deal. But when problems stack on top of each other, you become too burdensome. We don't want to connect ourselves with you. You're like getting into the lizard people territory now. You're getting into the Jeffrey Epstein territory now. But you'll see as we go on here.
But they brought, Jeffrey Toobin back. Toobin, exposed himself during a Zoom call while he thought his camera was off. But that wasn't a conflict of interest. That didn't bring into question their journalistic standards. All this mess around Chris Cuomo does. Now, of course, Chris Cuomo isn't the biggest problem with CNN and their journalistic standards. It's really about their framing around issues that are always pro-corporate, pro-business, pro-wealthy. Very rarely are they ever actually representing the working class and their needs and their desires. That's the biggest issue with CNN and mainstream press generally. But this was a high-profile example showcasing how they have, their biggest host on the network on primetime, how he was working with his governor brother to help him during a time when his brother was receiving all those allegations. So having that conflict of interest there. Now, yes, Cuomo didn't defend his brother on air during that time, but he used his connections behind the scenes to work for his brother as an advisor. You can't do that. Like, if you want to help your
Oh, he did so much more than that. In 2018, when Cynthia Nixon was running for governor, Chris Cuomo launched a ton of videos on social media to make sure that the name Cuomo was out there as much as possible. So he was using his platform to help his brother get elected in 2018. I remember this because my inner circle of activists, we discussed it and talked about don't share any of his videos because we can see what he's doing here. He's trying to get that name recognition out there right before the election. So that was going on. And then when we went into the pandemic and Andrew Cuomo had the abysmal performance on the pandemic, where thousands of New Yorkers were dying because of his poor judgment. And when he was debating whether or not certain school districts or counties were going to reopen, he was fighting with the municipal governments. His brother Chris was bringing him onto his show, and they were telling jokes about which one of them their mother loved the best. He did absolutely everything in his power to humanize his brother and distract people from thinking of this dude as the monster that he was, while he was allowing thousands of people to die. The sexual allegations are absolutely bad, but also thousands of people died.
brother, fine, help your brother, but leave your job at CNN. You can't help your brother, who is a sitting governor, during a time like that, intimately involved with the strategizing and the advising and using your connections with other journalists and sources to try and help your brother. You can't do that as a journalist and not expect to have this, mess come from it. So he got fired for good reason. Now, a little more here. So CNN's PR put out this statement saying Chris Cuomo was suspended earlier this week pending further evaluation of new information that came to light about his involvement with his brother's defense. We retained a respected law firm to conduct the review and have terminated him effective immediately. While in the process of that review, additional information has come to light. Despite the termination, we will investigate as appropriate. So I'm going to get to in a bit here maybe what that additional information is, and that may have been what tipped the scales for them to fire him this quickly as opposed to having a more prolonged investigation. But before I get to that, Chris Cuomo also released a statement saying, "This is not how I want my time at CNN to end, but I have already told you why and how I helped my brother. So let me now say, as disappointing as this is, I could not be more proud of the team at Cuomo Primetime and the work we did as CNN's #1 show in the most competitive time slot. I owe them all and will miss that group of special people who did really important work." All right, that's the full statement. You didn't apologize for helping your brother against these serious allegations. Just talked about your ratings.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely. But you know what? We saw within the leaked messages that this is what Chris does. He was working on marketing messaging the entire time. He was coaching his brother on how to handle his own scandal, and now that's exactly what he's doing as well. Is that he's trying to use weasel words and just get out of the situation and hope that people are just going to be confused and puzzled by his little marketing messaging here, and that he doesn't need to make any real apologies.
I don't know. I find it kind of weird. But hey, when you're that sheltered, you apparently don't really care about how your actions impact individuals or people, society. So, he just thought it was good to pump his ratings. All right. Do you? But this may be the extra piece as to, well, part of maybe why he didn't bring up the allegations, but also maybe what tipped CNN to fire him this soon. From Jody Cantor here, Chris Cuomo was fired 3 days after the network received a new accusation of sexual misconduct from a former junior colleague. This means that both Cuomo brothers have lost their positions in the wake of Me Too accusations. Now, there isn't a lot of details yet on this new accusation. There was actually another accusation before this that came out from that is a person that named themselves someone that Chris Cuomo used to work for, though that person's accusation, she said it was not sexual in nature, but it was more of a power thing, and she was touched in the process. But whatever. Regardless, this new accusation is not.
This is where PTSD is getting triggered for me, because I also was touched inappropriately, and I wouldn't call it a non-sexual way, but I don't think it was like a sexually motivated way. But it was certainly a way to make me humiliated and dehumanized in that moment. And it was a bully tactic. And every one of that organizer's peers has spent years gaslighting me over that situation. Folks, not all sexual harassment means that they were into you. It means most cases of rape are a case of power. I'm not saying I was raped, but most cases of rape are a case of power. And that can be true also with inappropriate touching. It's kind of like when you have a really childish sibling who puts their finger up to your forehead and says, "I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you." They're just trying to really fucking piss you off and make you uncomfortable. But in the case of what happened to me, my bottom was being grabbed. I was being asked repeatedly, "Do I love you?" And not only did I have to go through that horrific experience, I then went through stalking and harassment and bullying for 3 additional years.
Much detail on it yet, so I'm not going to get into that part of it. But clearly, I think if CNN knew about this, which it sounds like they did, I'm sure this just led them to firing him earlier than they were going to anyways, because this coming out means they have to do even more investigation, and it prolongs the whole process. They probably just figured, you know what, it's not worth my time or worth our time. We're going to get rid of him. On top of that, they had people at CNN that were apparently pissed at CNN for not dealing with Chris Cuomo, not getting rid of him before this. So they figure, you know what, we'll get rid of him now, move on from this situation, and yeah, that's what they did. So there you go.
Yes. Okay. So I will conclude on that. So basically, and not only that, I mean, his peers were pissed off that this wasn't getting addressed, which CNN, shame on you. Shame on you for letting this go on for so long. But in parallel, let's talk about what is happening in other parts of politics. Folks, there are a lot of you out there who are participating in politics so that you can attend the drinking events, so that you can sit around and get high and hypothesize, so that you can cheat on your spouses. Folks, if your goal is to party, don't gaslight the people that you drag into your bullshit. Don't gaslight the people you drag into your bullshit. It's on you to be respectable people. And, we're all activists. We're all trying to do the right thing. It's not cool for any of you to get into this, do bad things, and then lie about it. Not cool at all. That's exactly what Chris Cuomo and his brother are doing right here. They're just like, well, I can fuck around. We're married men. We can fuck around. And then we can just lie about it. We can cover it up. We can come up with some marketing material here and gaslight the victims of our dumbass bullshit. We can do that. It seems like I've seen it far more in politics than any other facet of my life. But another place where I've seen this kind of craziness is the theater. But, as they say, politicians are just failed actors.